Hello, I'm Pastor Alan Bair, and this morning I want to talk about, like always, I want to talk about what it means to be a Christian and how to actually live as a Christian, how to actually be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And something came to me the other day that I've been reflecting on quite a bit, actually. And the thought that came to me as I was praying and meditating, and I was thinking about all the things that I've wanted to do for the Lord, and all the things that I've tried to do for Him, thinking that I was being obedient. And what came to me was Him telling me, I never asked you to do those things. Think about that for a second. And so I ruminated on that for a while. And it wasn't just I never asked you to do those things, although it was true. But it was a much more in general. I never asked you to do them. I never asked anybody to do them, per se. And I've been thinking about that a lot. So, and it came to me, and it really just kind of struck me that to be a disciple of Jesus Christ is about being and not doing. It's not something you do. It's something you are. Because to be a disciple of Jesus Christ is to disengage from yourself and surrender to His life being lived out through you in every action, word, and circumstance, in all aspects of your life, and as you live and move through your life in this world. So, I offer this in contrast to what a lot of churches teach, a lot of Bible schools teach. They're very driven to evangelize, get the word out, missionize the world. And, they want to do great things for God. But the truth is, He never asked us to do great things. He never asked us to do them. He never drove us, per se. He never told us, He never commanded us to do great things. What He asked us to do was remain in Him. What He asked us to do was to follow Him. And that is the first and primary, most important thing He ever asked us to do. See, there is no objective to accomplish in terms of being a disciple of Jesus Christ. There's no head count of how many people you preach the gospel to. There's no competition for size of church that you lead. And you see people wearing themselves out. You see pastors, you see missionaries, you see devout, godly people absolutely wearing themselves out for the Lord, what they believe to be for the Lord, when the truth is He never asked us to do that. And so you see burnout all over the place. You see pastors burnt out. You see missionaries burnt out because they've been driving themselves so hard. But all of those things are good things. Being a pastor is a good thing. Being a missionary is a good thing. Running Vacation Bible School is a good thing. Doing charity is a good thing. These are all good things. But those are things we are doing. They're not things He asked us to do, per se. So there is no objective to accomplish as far as being a disciple of Jesus Christ. There's no list of rules for you to keep. There's only really, as far as the conditions of discipleship that Jesus laid down, where he said, if you don't do this, you can't be my disciple. I actually have them posted in Greek on the wall of my office in the original Greek. And basically what they say is that if you love father, brother, sister, mother, wife, or even your own soul or psyche more than me, you can't be my disciple. It says, if you don't pick up your cross, if you don't carry your cross, your own cross, and come behind me, you can't be my disciple. And he also said, as I'm looking at it over here on the wall, if you don't let go of all of your possessions, basically, if you don't abandon all of you, if you don't let go of all of your possessions, you can't be my disciple. And so, really, what he was talking about as far as the conditions of being a disciple is letting go, first and foremost, whether it's actually physically letting go and abandoning something, or whether it's internal work of letting go. Because, of course, there are some practical things in this, even then and in this day and age where, people do need to eat, people do need to do those things. We need to drive cars in order to get to work. That we have to have access to certain things. But it's a matter of internally letting go of them. And whether you psychologically and internally give them over to God so that they're now His. I mean, they were always His to begin with, but it's a matter of acknowledging that fact. Or whether or not it's actually letting go of it and putting it out of your sight, giving it away, because it's too much of a temptation to keep it within your sphere of view. But there are no list of rules for us to keep. There is only this letting go that he taught and mandated as a condition of discipleship. Letting go from our own self, or how we identify ourselves, and our things, and cooperating with him in his activity through you. That's it. That is what is being a disciple of Jesus Christ. When Jesus walked the earth, he taught and made disciples because that was what the Father was doing through him. He himself did nothing but surrender and submit to the Father's life and will through him. Now think about that for a second. Jesus said on more than one occasion, the Son can do nothing from himself, but only what he sees the Father doing. And just think about that. Everything he did, every place he went, every miracle he performed, every word he said, Jesus wasn't doing. He was being. The only thing he was doing was surrendering to the Father and letting the Father speak and act through him. He himself did nothing but surrender and submit to the Father's life and will through him. Jesus Christ didn't do. He just was. When he gave what's known as the Great Commission, for example, the instruction was to disciple the nations as you go. How do we disciple? How do you teach anything? First and foremost, by being. First and foremost, by being a disciple. You demonstrate what a disciple actually is, what a disciple looks like. That's the first step to discipling somebody else, is show them what it looks like. Doesn't matter what you say. If what you say doesn't match what you do, or rather what you are, why should they follow? So first and foremost, we disciple by being. And by others seeing Jesus Christ acting and speaking through us, just as those in the first century saw the Father acting and speaking through him. We demonstrate what a disciple looks like by what we are, not what goals we try to accomplish. So stop doing. Stop trying to do things for Jesus. He never asked us to do. He asked us to let go and be, just as he said that if you've seen him, you've seen the Father. So also, if you've seen an actual disciple of Jesus Christ, you've seen Jesus Christ. It's one of the reasons why when Paul wrote, he was saying, imitate me, as I also imitate Christ. If you've seen a disciple, if you've seen Peter, if you've seen Paul, if you've seen John, if you've seen a real disciple, the person you've seen is Jesus Christ. And if you've seen Jesus Christ, then you've seen the Father, because it's the Father acting through him and him acting through the disciple. So the first step is to let go, internally and sometimes externally, as I talked about, of everything which you fear to lose, and yourself especially. This is actually a very key part of being a disciple, and one which Jesus harped on repeatedly, as I just mentioned, as far as the conditions of discipleship are concerned. So what happens is when we're afraid to lose something, that fear takes over and we grab control back. What do I mean by this? So let's say I've got a car and I need that car to get into town. I need that car to get to church. I need that car to get to work. That car is very important to me, and if anything happens to that car, I'm afraid to lose it, because then I can't do all those things and everything goes to pot, right? And so, and maybe this isn't the greatest of examples, because a car is a very practical thing, but continuing with this line of thought, and so I'm afraid to lose it. And so if anything happens to damage the car and make it so that I lose the car, I start becoming afraid. I start, or if the possibility arises that anything could happen, panic sets in, and it becomes a threat to, and that possibility of losing that car becomes a threat to all of those things that I need to happen in order to survive, right? So, and when that panic sets in, when that fear sets in, that's when I start trying to grab back control from him, assuming that during the day I have surrendered myself to him, I have asked him to act and speak through me, I've done all those things, but then when I become afraid of losing something and I give in to that fear then causes me to grab back control from him, right? Or it can push me, it can tempt me to grab back control. And then I do, and then all of a sudden I'm functioning in my own flesh and everything's going to pot. So there's that example. Another example might be a relationship. You could have, and I've known several people who have been in relationships where they absolutely feel like they need this other person to be happy. And their world kind of revolves around this other person, and their whole identity revolves around being with this other person. And so they cling to this relationship, and they're terrified of losing it. And so again, if anything happens that could threaten that relationship, then panic sets in, and then they grab back control, and all of a sudden they're functioning in the flesh, and you start seeing mistake after mistake. You start seeing anger. You start seeing jealousy. You start seeing envy. You start seeing all of these other things as people try to cope with that fear and that potential loss. And sometimes, because we go down that road, the loss happens anyway. And so the first step as far as being a disciple of Jesus Christ and what he taught was to let go of all of those things. Let go of everything that you're clinging to. And sometimes it is necessary to actually physically let go, to give it away, to abandon it, to walk away from that person. It's not that we don't care about the person, but that clinging to that person is not love, it's attachment. That clinging to that person is all about us. It's not all about what's best for them. And so yes, the first step is to let go, internally, sometimes externally, of everything which you're afraid to lose. And yourself especially. And what do I mean by that? I mean everything that you identify yourself with. Letting go of who you believe yourself to be. Letting go of your own, what you believe to be your own self-interest, what things will make you happy. All of those kinds of things, everything you think you are. And this is a process. This takes time to work through. The second step here is to ask him to act and speak through you, to live his life through you. So the first step is to let go of everything you're afraid to lose, including you. Just let it go. Disengage from it. Second step is to actually ask him to act and speak through you, to give him permission to do this, either implicitly or explicitly. And usually you really want to do it explicitly first, until you develop that relationship and rapport where it's understood that he has permission, that you are going to back off and let him do so. The final step is to let him do it. And it's really that simple. The final step is simply to let him act and speak through you, and not take back control when things start to scare you, because they will. You know, it can be a little disorienting when you start saying things that, you know, you wouldn't normally say. When you start doing things that you might not normally do. When you start being pushed by him to do things that you wouldn't normally do. And it can get a little scary. And that's another thing that has to be let go of. But the true disciple of Jesus Christ has no need for a list of rules or commands to follow, or restrain his behavior, because it is Jesus Christ acting and speaking through him, and not he himself. There is absolutely no reason for a rule against murder. If the person acting and speaking, there is no way, it's just not going to happen. Does that make sense? If it is Jesus Christ acting and speaking through you, there is no reason for a rule against theft. There is no reason for a rule against lying. There's no reason for rules against envy or codes of dress or any of those things. Because the only thing that's going to be produced, if it is Christ living his life out through you, is Jesus Christ. And him loving everybody else through you, doing what is best for everybody else through you. Do you really think Christ is going to go stab somebody in the back go rob a bank, defraud somebody. No. And so this is also what Paul was talking about when he talks about the use of the Torah, the use of the law, that it was never made for a righteous man. It was made for people who are malfunctioning. It was made for people who are functioning from themselves. It wasn't made for Christ. And so if it's Christ acting and speaking through you, there's no rules to keep. The only thing that has to be right there, the only thing you have to do is surrender to him and stay that way. As Jesus taught, remain in me and I in you. And he was very clear when he said that without me you can't do anything at all. So let's do this. Before you do anything else during the day, stop, take a few moments or a few minutes or however long it takes. Let go. Train yourself to let go. And turn your words, behaviors, and responses over to the Spirit of Christ with whom you are joined. Train yourself to do this every time fear starts to arise. Train yourself to do this with every decision, every moment. And every time you feel like something's going wrong, let go. Be, don't do. Don't remind yourself of commandments. Don't remind yourself of, oh, this is what it means to be a good Christian. Just let go. Give him, continue to give him your explicit permission to act and speak through you, to respond to these new things. Don't take back control no matter what happens, no matter how frightening it gets. See, this is the purpose of all temptations, regardless of what they are, to get us to yank back control out of either fear or anger, or because we're hungry or need some bodily, or feel like we need either to eat or drink or consume something, or for sexual desire, which kind of falls into the former anyway. So, but that is the whole purpose of all temptations, no matter what the temptation is for, to get us to yank back control, to get us to be afraid, to get us to be angry and say, oh, I have to go deal with this. Again, it's that this is a threat, I have to deal with it. And that is the purpose of the temptation, to get us to respond in this way. I need this in order to survive. This is a threat to my survival. I have to deal with it. And we have to let go of those things that we're afraid of happening or that we're afraid of losing. We have to say to those temptations, no. It's okay if this happens. It's okay if this doesn't happen. This is not something I need to deal with. This is something that, I have turned over control of the Spirit of Christ, control to the Spirit of Christ within me. And he's the one who has to deal with it. Through me. But all of that work is internal. Nobody else is going to see that. Nobody else is going to know about that, except for you and for him. So, let me go back to let me go back a minute, and I want to talk again about being a disciple of Jesus Christ. Again, it's about being and not doing. So we go through our lives, we go to work, we make dinner, we go to church. Some of us, anyways, go to church. We go to concerts, we go to wherever. In every situation, it's not a matter of doing. It's a matter of just surrendering and being and letting Him be through us everywhere that we are, and not trying to protect ourselves from what He might say or do through us. This is what Jesus did. Everywhere He went, He just was. And the Father did and said through Him. But Jesus Himself, He was just there, surrendering to the Father and being obedient in that. If we as Christians, if we as disciples of Jesus Christ don't focus on anything else in Christian practice, but we focus on this one thing, and that is letting go and asking Him to act and speak through us, to giving Him permission to do so, and trusting Him to do so. If we don't focus on anything else but this, we will do well. Because you do this, and everything else will fall into place as a disciple. Everything else will happen. But it has to be Him through you, and not you following rules and trying to do things for Him, or trying to be the best Christian you can be. It's just this one thing, and that's letting go, remaining in Him, and not taking back control. So that's going to be it, I think, for right now. As always, be Jesus for people. Give Jesus to people. Receive Jesus from people and see Jesus in people today. Ask Him to act and speak through you, to love all others through you. Surrender yourselves to Him, that He might be to you as the hand to the glove.